Firefly is a Fox original show that aired in 2002 that has been floating, flying, buzzing around my channel for quite some time. I've gotten comments all the way back since I lived in, I think Alabama, where people have been asking me to give my thoughts on Firefly, and I have from time to time, but I've always made clear to say, I never really encountered Firefly until I was in college, and some friends of mine would just have it on at various gatherings, and I would just catch an episode or two here and there. Coming back to Firefly, specifically Firefly Serenity for this video, with a bit more information under my belt and knowledge and wisdom towards the genres in television, this is truly remarkable in terms of standing head and shoulders of its contemporaries for the time it was released in. Firefly hit the ground running and looks as good, if not maybe even a bit better, than Star Trek of its era. In fact, it easily looks better than a whole lot of stuff you're getting on the Sci-Fi channel put out today, more than 20 years after its initial release. Yep, made a whole lot of people feel old there, didn't I? And yes, I'm bringing that visual compliment over to just the practical set designs and costuming as well. I am not sure off the top of my head what the budget would be for the first season of Firefly or the first few episodes. Magic of editing. But rest in peace to Shauna Trippick, I think that's how you say the last name. Absolutely sensational costume design that I don't even think needs to be updated. If they were gonna do Firefly again, just copy, paste. And I think this level of success in establishing kind of that Western, gritty, grimy science fiction world is part of the reason that Firefly's legacy has held on so strongly to the zeitgeist among nerds, despite it being 20 plus years past its original air date.
I think we should call it your grave.
Curse your sudden but inevitable betrayal.
There are so many shows from this era of science fiction television that you can barely even find a trace of online at this point. They are but little more than dust in the wind. But is it really just the striking visuals of the show that have allowed it to hold on so well? Of course not. There's also so much to compliment here when it comes to character and personality, and that's gonna take me to talking about something that's a little bit uncomfortable here, but we gotta get this out of the way. There is a disgusting piggy attached to the Firefly show that unfortunately cannot be entirely erased from it. I'm not going to be saying names because I am not entirely sure what the legal status around this person is anymore, and I've already been threatened to be sued this year, so I just do not want to deal with that. That being said, I don't think this one disgusting piggy should be able to ruin so many franchises that had hundreds of people contributing to each of them for us as fans to enjoy. I don't think Sarah Michelle Gellar's career should suddenly just not be allowed to discuss Buffy, and I don't think Nathan Fielder's career, wow. And I don't think Nathan Fillion's career should just have Firefly surgically removed from it. I feel a little bit bad for piggies because I grew up around pigs. What's an animal that actually, let's not get into that. Let's get into characters. And if people like this video enough and want me to keep on going, I will do an entire second deep dive where I get into the rest of the season of television. I have no idea why the episodes were apparently aired out of order. That's horrible. What the hell, broadcast television? But equally contributing to the appeal of this entire crew, beyond just the writing of the characters, is across the board pitch perfect casting. There's a really good reason why so many of the actors involved in this production that did not even fully get through its first season before getting canceled went on to have either good or great careers. We're watching this crew of space rapscallions basically all survive in the desolate black void of space where humanity itself in some ways has been driven to savagery by depending on each other. But all of that is wrapped up in some nuggety tension between the crew.
Little Kaylee here just wishes you was a gynecologist.
Jane, you'll keep a civil tongue in that mouth or I will sew it shut. Is there an understanding between us?
You don't pay me to talk pretty just because Kaylee gets lubed up over some big city dandy.
Walk away from this table right now.
And if you're paying attention, you might draw some similarities to another well-known franchise that involves rapscallions in space who are essentially scavengers depending on each other for survival while the worst and best of humanity is put on display. And that would be Cowboy Bebop. I want to make this very, very clear. In no way, shape, or form am I implying that Firefly is a ripoff of Cowboy Bebop. Thank you. That is reductive and super dismissive of key differences between the two franchises that absolutely make them distinct. But could Firefly be inspired by Cowboy Bebop? I would be startled to learn that it wasn't. Really, I'm bringing this up just to underline that if you've experienced one but not the other, you probably should. The crossover is immense in the appeal, from the character style of writing to the aesthetics of the world, and from what I saw in this pilot movie, the morality, the approach to survival the crew has together. And yes, both of these are, without question, the absolute distillation of the Western set in space. Firefly even more so. Firefly aggressively more so, because where there are aesthetic distinctions between the two, Firefly continues to fill in that space with flat out Western aesthetics. Don't believe me? Here's a horse.
Mel.
Here's this iconic hip shot for a pistol pull. This guy's wearing a bowler hat and a tie. But before we get into what happens in the events of Firefly Serenity, a couple more just quick notes. I like the tension that exists continually on the ship as this new cast of characters is introduced, because of how much we don't know we can trust our own crew that we're introduced to. It's pretty well emphasized and underlined that Malcolm, Nathan Fillion, who I will try to not call Nathan Fielder.
Wow. That's a good sentence.
Thank you.
Is an outlaw. Not a little bit of an outlaw, not a diet outlaw. He executes people. And in fact, when they do take on passengers to try and make a little bit more money for their next cargo run, which they are holding illegal cargo, he straight up tells members of his crew that if any of those people on board find out what they're smuggling, kill them.
If anyone gets nosy, just shoot them.
The second note is, if you are bothered by an overuse of cliches, that will become a point of criticism you probably hold for Firefly. I like it. I enjoy a bit of camp, even in my stuff that's trying to be a bit grimier and darker. But Firefly, even for me, began to verge into the space of, wow, so we are just not even embracing tropes, we are making them the foundation. Not inherently a criticism though. Tropes are fine, they exist for a reason. They are tried and true beats of storytelling that audiences have shown they love, enjoy, and are willing to swallow down again and again. And Firefly does a really good job of packaging them in the way, especially for 2002, that feels wonderfully fresh. It's just that if you take a little bit of a magnifying glass to it, the tropes become apparent. I haven't seen, in the brief amount of research I have done for like the critical reception and views in hindsight on Firefly, a whole lot of people talk about something that I think Firefly deserves even more praise for, and that is its realization of human culture scattered across the stars. There's an early on business dealing between Malcolm and another outlaw type figure, and the entire time while guns are being hinted at and all these typical writing moments you'd expect to happen for our action star Han Solo inspired captain, while all of that is going on, ships are flying overhead and a prop of paper has movement on it, not in like the Harry Potter way but the sci-fi way. Firefly throws hands with high-end science fiction cinema, and just the smallest thing that's entirely for me, but I'm so happy this show got right. There is a brief beat at the end of this story arc where we see someone looking through a sniper scope, and one of my biggest pet peeves in movies is when you get that perspective of sniper scope and it moves like it's on a gimbal. Just this most beelined, like, oh, the person's nervous, there's action going on, and it's just, anyway, I'm just gonna say thank you, Firefly, for getting that right. But all right, let's go ahead and get into the plot, narrative, story, and characters of this crew and Firefly Serenity. Believe it or not, Firefly starts with some bang. Firefly starts with this grand sweeping battlefield where we see Malcolm trying to do his best to survive in a battlefield, and he's shown to be a Christian man. keep that in mind, and a great compassionate leader. We see him accomplish a small objective where he's able to shoot down a spaceship from an AA gun, but just when they think reinforcements are going to arrive, things get worse. Malcolm is in the middle of dealing with a soldier who is frozen out of fear, tells him, hey,
We're not gonna die. We can't die, Bendis. And you know why? Because we are so very pretty. Huh? Look at that chiseled jaw. Huh? Come on.
gets him out of that frozen flight or flight state, but just as he does, he is told that there is no reinforcements coming. The aerial support they expected has been canceled, and he looks up and sees waves upon waves of more unnamed enemy, I think it might be Reavers, attack. And that soldier he spent so much effort to get back up on his feet is shot and killed. We hard cut to 6 years later. And just gotta say, outstanding opener. I'm emotionally invested in the character. I like seeing that he's able to be a good leader. I like seeing this angle of faith introduced that could definitely be played with. And this hard cut then leading us to seeing a very different version of this man. It's kind of that conflict in itself, that distance and you wanting to fill in the gap with your assumptions as a viewer, that really made me realize even in the first few minutes of Firefly, I was hooked. But from this intense, shocking battle sequence, the 6 years later picks up with our crew in space. We aren't entirely informed who they were fighting for, what exactly was going on, but you can infer a lot as a viewer. And seeing them quietly cutting into a pile of ship wreckage in space, you also can infer things are not going great, and that is underlined when we see the Alliance. The Great Authority shows up, and it is revealed to us that yes, Malcolm and his crew are acting as illegal scavengers who are cutting into a ship to steal its supplies. We need to understand, though, who exactly is on this crew. I can't do justice how well Firefly introduces this entire crew, but with all the praise I've already put on Firefly, and do not worry those who do not like it, my criticisms will come, this is the shining diamond on top of the pyramid. I, by the end of this hour and a half, knew every single one of them by name, understood their motivations, what they cared about, and their biggest tribulation. From a writing perspective, shockingly well done. But now, let's just soullessly, heartlessly, hollowly list them off. We have Kaylee, a joyful gearhead, providing a much-needed smile and vulnerability to the crew. She is the mechanic. We have Malcolm, who I've already established is the captain, a bit cold-hearted and seems less soft than when we saw him 6 years prior in the flashback. We have Zoe Washburn, his right hand it seems, who's married to Whedon and is a gunslinger. Whedon Washburn is played by, you'll love to see him in anything and everything, Alan Tudyk. We also have Inara, a high-end companion who works for the Alliance Elite and has some really interesting camera shots and editing to show how intoxicating her presence can be. We have Jane Cobb, who is a badass brute and heavy muscle of the crew, who, as you can probably expect, butts head with Malcolm. Simon, an uptight and suited up doctor, who seems to be pretty darn good at what he does. Shepard Dariel, I did not write his name down in my notes, and I even said earlier I remembered all the names. It's either Brooke or Book. And he is a man of God who is looking for a ship off the planet. And finally, Lawrence, who looks a bit nervous in every shot. Keep that in mind. And all of these characters' introductions concretely set them for starting points in your mind. I mean, here's even this just one line from the Shepherd.
You on a trip, Grandpa? Need safe passage? We're cheap. We're cheap, we're clean, Brutus. What's your desk, Grandpa? Come on.
Never married.
What?
Not a grandpa.
And I would say the next 5 to 10 minutes of the narrative are largely used to establish not only who these people are, but their relationships to each other. And that permeating tension of them feeling like they have had experience together, there is some form of trust, but also having worked together long enough to know where they're going to butt heads before it even happens, though, provides that three-dimensional relationship, resulting in a crew that feels tried and true. The best example of this I can throw up for just a clip on screen to give you the impression of what I'm talking about is there's also, as there is with so many iconic science fiction franchises, they all eat a meal around the table in the spaceship beat. It's in Event Horizon, it is in Alien, it's even in The Matrix.
Share with all of us.
Well, it won't last.
Taking a
They're not the same when they're frozen.
Pass the tomatoes.
The important thing is the spices.
Why this brief trip that should just be a point A to B for everyone on board ends up feeling successfully tense the entire time is our crew is used as a potential source of danger. This is where things go from bad to dire. Hammond, doing his job well because he's Alan Tudyk, of course he did his job well, figures out that they have been tagged somehow. There is a mole on board who is broadcasting their location.
You got a mole on board.
The doctor is found to be entering the cargo hold he was told to stay out of, which results in...
Forget your toothpaste? Oh! Got exactly no time for games. What do they know?
Hate to say it, Captain, but you've got the wrong man.
Son of a bitch.
Simon Tam, you are bound by law to stand down.
The doctor. Oh. Hey. Is there a reward?
And intelligently, I think there's actually a little bit of blame for how poorly this situation goes that reasonably should rest on Malcolm's shoulder, because we see more crew members begin to show up at the commotion, and because of his hot-headedness, one of his crew members ends up shot. Should have listened to the priest. Fortunately, there's a doctor on board. Unfortunately, that broadcast from the mole was heard, and the Alliance is here. We just went from dire to ah! And it was at this point where, despite my impressions of just catching random episodes of Firefly here and there, I had to admit, this is a brilliant pilot. I'm so invested, characters are so well done, and the tension, the threat, despite me only being like 20 minutes into this world, is drawing me in deeply. And it's so important for everyone, I think, who wants to write characters, put a book out one day, to note, you can have outlaw characters, you can have badasses, gunslingers, but what helps people continue to emotionally relate to them is showing what they do, how they respond when they are somehow rattled. And with Kaylee shot, seeing how this crew, who previously has been so threatening and scary, react, ties your heart directly right back into them, being sympathetic, with very little work needing to be done. Empathy from a character is not a bad thing, and badasses need to still be capable of empathy, fear, and being rattled to maintain being relatable. But as you saw earlier though in the clips, they're actually not the ones who were meant to be brought to the Alliance. They're all wanted at this point, but the one who inspired the signal being set off is the doctor. But why? Well, Malcolm kicks open his cargo. Another barely clothed beautiful woman because early 2000s TV and that one person involved. It's established that she's been through some truly horrible things, and Simon, no, is not some monster who's trying to buy like a woman in a coma, and instead is her brother who's trying to rescue her. His sister's name though is River, and she was a prodigy, sent off to learn from the best of the best, but while she was gone, things did not go as planned, and she sent a plea for help to her brother. I'm not going to get too much more into it because I do not want to get entirely demonetized. I've said so many positive things. I'm going to pull back here a little bit and say some more critiques. Know though it's coming from a bit of an asshole-ish place. I'm fully willing to admit that. On a surface level, I'm having a wonderful time watching this. We are just going through a narrative checklist, though, of tropes. There is very, very little here beyond the nice set dressing and good personalities that's new. If you are wanting some like Adrian Tchaikovsky style boundary-pushing science fiction, that is not what this is. It's all well done. It's just all gonna be things you've seen before, even for 2002. In terms of what I expected though, this pilot is head and shoulders above. At first, I want to give a big thank you to today's sponsor, Squarespace. As you've probably heard, Squarespace is the all-in-one platform that's here to help encourage entrepreneurs to succeed online. Whether you're just starting out or managing a growing brand, Squarespace makes it easy to build a website and sell anything from content to products to time. And that education angle is so important to why I think Squarespace is a wonderful platform to use, because they are here to give you the resources to not only get your website website running. But once you learn all the features, you're gonna be able to stand out online at a space more competitive than ever every single day. Their asset library allows you to upload, organize, and access all of your content from one place, as well as manage all your files from one central hub and use them across the entire Squarespace platform. As we all know, the ecosystems we engage with are important, and Skillshares is robust and healthy. And for all those who do not have a background like myself in coding, Squarespace's flexible website templates provide you with a list of professional designs for every category in use. But I think my favorite part is Squarespace's Fluid engine, so that yes, you can do the Tony Stark and just drag and drop the assets you want, and it'll then adjust them for mobile, tablet, desktop, what have you. So you can now unlock that creativity like never before. Whether it's blogs, email campaigns, gated member areas, Squarespace has what you need to get started. So head on over to squarespace.com for a free trial. When you're ready to make your first purchase of a website or domain, go to www.squarespace.com to save 10% off your first purchase and get your business up and running today. So we have that big plot going on. Alliance is here. Secret woman. We must run. On top of that, there's the burning kind of B-plot question here of what the hell are we gonna do with this federal officer that we just knocked unconscious and took prisoner, that Jane really apparently just wants to kill.
And I'm scratching my head as to why we ain't dealt with him.
Kill a Fed? Can you think of a...
You want to throw me out the airlock? Fine, but River is not a part of this.
Can we maybe vote on the whole murdering people issue? We don't vote on my ship because my ship is not the running town hall.
This isn't sad.
And now that set up conflict within our crew begins to bubble over.
You throw them out, I'm leaving too.
Might be best you do.
Because superhuman intelligent women with a brother who's a super capable doctor, while the Alliance is showing up and a federal officer's on board. Recap done. Now, if you haven't checked out my new podcast, Good on Paper, episode 2 will be out soon on the channel Shoveled Goblin. It's me and Evan from Book Reviews Kill. Lots of fun. We're going over the publication process for self-pub, indie pub, trad pub. It's a good time. Back to the episode. There is a clear villain, though, among the crew, the worst option to help balance out the various standpoints we're getting among the crew we're supposed to relate to, and that's going to be the federal officer, and he just descends into over-the-top evil when he says this line.
That girl is a precious commodity.
Pretty clear this is an awful situation at this point. We've gone from to full-on just run around screaming, panicking. I think right when the feds get involved and you're a criminal, that's when you should just start fully freaking the out. But if there is one level even higher than that, Firefly manages to achieve it by introducing one additional threat called the Reavers. And this is probably my least favorite part of the entire episode. I have no idea if this is a fan favorite later on as an antagonist or whatnot, but essentially it is humans that have been surviving on the bound edges of space. But from the way they're talked about, well, I'll just let this monologue do the work.
If they take the ship, to death, eat our and clothing. And if we're very, very lucky, they'll do it in that order. That
set a hell of a tone. We are now beyond chicken running around with his head cut off, screaming type fear, and have entered, here's a shot of Inara preparing to possibly unalive herself out of what might happen if things go poorly level of stakes. Goddamn. Fortunately for our crew,
they're holding course. I guess they weren't hungry.
And now we also see that Kaylee is recovering. If you weren't really believing that Malcolm was actually an asshole, though, he does something here that is just...
Kaylee's dead.
That is, it's a full disclosure. I would laugh my ass off at that. I'm a bad person when it comes to my sense of humor. But if someone told me they did that after I was done laughing, I would have so much distrust for that person for the rest of my life. And there's not really a great point for me to set this up, so I'm just gonna inject it in roughly here. Inara and Malcolm clearly have the typical early 2000s, early series romance between them where they butt heads in like every interaction they have. She is not willing to back down and just blindly accept his authority, is renting a room on his ship to do her thing around the solar system, but doesn't exactly like the way he handles things. Then in return, Malcolm is an asshole, as we've established. And so they start with that grr. But very quickly, there's a potential there for like serious, genuine connection. And even though it is the most overplayed, overdone, literally since Han Solo and Princess Leia type setup for romance, it still works for me. As I said, I like the camp. It's camp. It's there. It hooks me. And I think like romantasy readers will also defend this setup. You know where it's gonna go. That doesn't mean it's not tantalizing. Finally, though, they manage to arrive at this one individual who Malcolm thinks might be willing to buy their stolen product for a severely reduced price. And if you doubted, maybe you don't believe me, maybe you've seen the times I've gotten things wrong in fantasy news and you're like, this silly guy doesn't know his stuff. If you doubted that this is more Western than Cowboy Bebop, more Western than Star Wars, I would like you to meet the genuinely just we're gonna do a Western part of Firefly Serenity, because they land on this planet where a group of people are surviving in a Wild West scenario to the point where they show up riding on horses, gunslinging. I'm not making, look, there they are. This is not something from a different show. They are just interacting with cowboys now. Cow women. Malcolm suspects this is not going to go well as a deal because when they radio down that they're going to be landing, the woman doesn't try and haggle him at all. And in Firefly, that means they probably have an ulterior motive. And I'm gonna go ahead and talk about how this deal goes, but just know how the show is edited. At this point, we're also seeing their prisoner, the Fed who's tied up, escape. And I did, at this point in the show, forget he existed because he just escapes when he needs to, and it's quickly dealt with. You'll see what I mean. And now, again, this is like my biggest criticism of the episode. The Reavers just return, and they justify it by being like, oh, I guess they are hungry. Why? Like, why? All right, it's clearly narratively just to have more tension, and it does do that. It just doesn't feel as smartly written in as the character stuff is. I think the character writing of Firefly, top notch, but how the world revolves around them and operates can be as clunky as just, why are the Reavers back?
I guess they got hungry again.
And I would say that's one of the few faulty leftover markers of the Piggy we're not going to be talking about. It's a weakness of that Piggy's writing. Getting back to that gut feeling, Malcolm is right and the deal goes bad. And brilliant characterization and foreshadowing something to come. The leader of this crew, who is trying to screw over Malcolm, hides behind a horse, and Malcolm does this. Poor horsey. Great consistent characterization for Malcolm. But all right, let's cut back to see what's been going on the Firefly this whole time. Because yes, the prisoner escaped and takes River hostage. Kaylee is able to signal to Alan Tudyk that something is going wrong. And so the doctor comes down as well, and a fight between the doctor and the Fed ensues, and the doctor ends out on top, holding a gun on the Fed. But when our team from the deal returns, this happens.
I'm not playing anymore. Anybody makes so much.
That might just be my favorite beat of characterization in the entire show. I'm aware it's a bit brutish and dumb, seeing someone just shoot someone else in the head. Let me defend it though, because a brutish moment can be well set up and justified. Here we begin. We know Malcolm is a veteran, someone who has active combat experience. He is also someone who has seen people he clearly cares about die around him. He has only been hardened since then by what seems to be a very cold world. His crew is threatened, and a girl he knows who has been through horrific things, awful stuff, is now having a gun put against her head by someone he does not like, does not respect, and is capable of shooting people. Malcolm knows there are greater threats coming, and time is of the essence. It makes perfect sense for his character to see this and just go, I can make that shot, and not want to deal with it and risk it for the biscuit, because he does probably want this woman to live. He, more importantly, doesn't want another member of his crew getting shot. And then seeing him and Jane just fall lockstep in line, pick up his body and throw it overboard, immaculate execution. It's not only a brutish moment that becomes character-wise interesting due to the setup to it, but the follow-through and chemistry with a character that Malcolm has been not always on the same page with. I like. Now, again, to a weaker beat, there's this spaceship chase with the Reavers now coming to try and get them, and Alan Tudyk pilots it, and while some of the ship shots are cool, the whole thing is kind of just undercut by not entirely feeling necessary. It feels like they're just putting in the Reavers here to be like, hey, so you know, they're gonna be a big problem in the rest of the season. I wouldn't be surprised to see one of the main cast end up actually getting killed by the Reavers at some point with how they've been written. They would feel kind of blunt if they didn't end up really harming the crew in some way, so I figure they are gonna tie into season 1 in a big way. Could be wrong, but there is a moment from Kaylee though I really enjoy here where she just kind of like says the ship is a good girl, and the acting from her.
It's my good girl.
There isn't a weak performance in the entire crew. That's rare. That's rare and precious. It's a sci-fi show where the acting from everyone, the casting and the writing feels pitch perfect. On that level for the fans already, I can understand why people are pissed this did not get more seasons. This takes us to the end of the opening of Firefly, where we see the priest and Inara having a talk where it's the kind of vibe you can only get where two very wise people from incredibly different walks of life talk. There's something magical about writing two characters who are experienced, who are respected, who have knowledge of a kind that contradicts the other, opening up to each other. And it might be my favorite character interaction, especially because of this conclusion to it.
I think I'm on the wrong ship.
Or maybe you're exactly where you ought to be.
Their siblings state their desire for someplace safe. Alan Tudyk and his wife go off to bang, and their dialogue is the most overtly piggy dialogue of the entire pilot.
Sir, I'd like you to take the helm, please. I need this man to tear all my clothes off.
And Malcolm and Jane in the episode, well, with this.
How come you didn't turn on me, Jane?
Money wasn't good enough.
What happens when it is?
Well, that'll be an interesting day.
I actually don't like how much I like the chemistry between the crew. It's upsetting how good it is. My concluding thoughts here are this was well above what I expected. The strengths of this pilot can even be seen in how well things that shouldn't have worked did. I mean, having horses walking around with cowboys on their backs should just be absurd in a sci-fi show like this, but because they're juxtaposed, one, to this intense standoff in a hostage situation, and are taking place in a world where humanity has been so reduced despite reaching so far, it ends up just kind of making sense. And in a crew full of characters I find myself immediately glomming onto, I have to say the standout is, to me, despite my criticisms of the clichéness of it, the relationship and chemistry between Inara and Malcolm. Yeah, it's a trope. You can point at it, criticize it on paper all you want. It's a big draw for me to come back to the next episode. I like it. And this was a big, fun, fancy pilot with a huge budget for its time. This had to be near record setting, I'm sure. It's just as someone who is familiar with these big movie style openings that I'm dreading seeing, you know, a follow-up episode that feels way less. Though there's good enough writing here, acting, casting, that I'd be down to watch it even if that's the case. It would bum me out, but I would still be like, yeah, Firefly's a ton of fun. And this just leaves me with one question. Why the hell was this aired out of order? I don't understand. There's even like a clear cut point where you could do a part 1 and 2. So I think that was obviously the plan. What happened? I don't know. And it's insane. And the damage that probably had to do is immense because this opening does legwork, and you could feel how much weaker experiencing this cast and crew would be if you lost it. If suddenly I just picked up the next episode, so many of the key moments that I found charming and endearing, they're going to be things that are built upon, obviously. And if we don't get those and you try and build upon nothing, who did this to Firefly? Was it like a deliberate action? I'm gonna do a whole deep dive, and if I find anything interesting, there'll be an insert right now. But But this has just been my first impressions of Firefly. Let me know if you like it, if you want to see a part 2 where I go through the actual season of the television. Like, subscribe, share the video. That's by far the best thing you can do. And if you're interested in seeing more content of a similar variety, but not necessarily my face, go ahead and check out our recently released interview on Between Two Perns with Terry Brooks. It is the funniest, arguably, and certainly most fun episode of Between Two Perns ever released, in my opinion. Here's a clip.
Would you consider yourself the father or the inventor of modern day plagiarism?
I would.
And like and subscribe if you have not already. Hit the Patreon if you want to support what I do here. And have a good one, y'all. Peace.